international community has both the moral and legal obligation to help in this cause because it is outside money, not African money, that fuels the illegal operations. Key to our collective efforts against terrorism is the need for a fully operational regional counter-terrorism center. This center will serve as a hub for intelligence sharing, operational coordination, and capacity building throughout our region.
Yes, indeed, President Bola Tinubu speaking about the need for a regional counter-terrorism structure to address the challenges and not leave it to external countries to handle for us. So we've got Mr. Dennis Amakre, former director with the SSS, joins us virtually from the States. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well,
good morning, Chamberlain.
Yeah, so security concerns and efforts to tackle them across board. First, we had that of the multi-layer policing structure being debated currently at the moment in the country, and then we now have this counter-terrorism appeal to come up with that approach for Africa. So you, former security operative, so well-versed in both areas, I might add. So let's start off with your impression of this counter-terrorism appeal by the president to all his counterparts in Africa to see how we can forge a common front to address these challenges. He believes it could make headway if we approach it that way. What do you think?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. I am excited. In fact, a lot of things happened yesterday. The counter-terrorism conference that was going on, and of course the one by the House of Representatives for state police. These are all issues that have been in the cooler for a very long time. The counterterrorism structure is, of course, we have a counterterrorism center in the Office of the National Security Advisor. And I don't think it has been operative for a very long time. We even have the heads. Some major generals have been appointed as the heads of that particular structure. But I don't know how far it has taken place, but with the new gusto and with the United Nations coming into it, we are going to have a better deal because we have been asking for that fusion center, the fusion center, to make it very operative so that things can be addressed in real time.
Let me jump in and ask you, I mean, I know that with the Navy in this country, they've got capabilities to address some of these challenges of pirates is become history now. And then seeing that capacity, and then even with the military and some other security agencies, we've seen intelligent, fantastic officers, some retired, some still serving, but some of these challenges that we grapple with in this country, many just cannot relate, particularly in context of these personalities that we do have. How do we, because you yourself just highlighted the counterterrorism unit in this country and what you think of them. So do you think we have a very good basis here? Because many will say, look, if we have to go with this, we need to be sure that we've covered our own end here. All of these encumbrances and bottlenecks are off the way so that we can have that common front first and foremost before we then extend our tentacles seeking Africa cooperation.
Well, the thing is that, security situations are more complicated when they are mixed with politics. And we would want, especially this government, to clean the house. Clean the house, make sure that the security aspect, the security function in the country this time is free and independent to work very well for the country. They said that in our constitution, the security and safety of the people is the primary responsibility of government. And if that is the case, then we should give it primary attention, either in budgeting or in doing things. In fact, it should be the first thing, to take care of either the military, the police.
What specifically would you want him to do? Practically, what kind of steps should he be taking?
Well, when we come to this, we need to restructure the security agencies. We need to restructure the review, because the structure we've been using since independence is not alive to the new emerging threats that we're having. So, number one, restructure the security agencies. And when we say security agencies, of course, the police is one of the major ones. And that's why I told you I was so excited, because yesterday they were talking about state police. We need to restructure it in such a way that the police is designed to address criminals or crimes that are happening in their locality. And we can go into that later, but you find out that if we start to deal with all the crimes in the way that is in the federal structure, the pyramidal federal structure, it will not work. So when you are restructuring, you want to divide the crime. Let there be federal crimes to be addressed by the federal police, state crimes to be addressed by the state police, and then, of course, local crimes, by the local sheriffs. If somebody go and steal eggs in a poultry farm, we are not going to call the federal police to come and deal with that. So these are the things, and that should be spelled out in the constitutional amendment that is going on, because that is the first things that we do.
Mr. Makri, I want you to be able to take you up on a few issues that were raised yesterday. It was a very intense conversation. We even heard the Deputy UN Secretary General, of course, talking about the social contract that government has with the citizens and delivering on good governance. And we also saw President Tinubu alluding to that in his own speech as well, where he talked about the root causes of these insecurity that we face across the country. But I want to take you up on a few things. A regional counterterrorism center. In what ways will a regional counterterrorism center help to fight the insecurity that we're feeling in the country? As you just alluded to the fact that at the local levels, we have a situation with our policing structure, and you said it needs restructuring. How do we get a regional counterterrorism center to work in a place where the local policing is, for want of a better phrase, has a few issues that need to be addressed?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. It still comes down to structuring. And then, of course, remember that all the countries, all the states in West Africa, as we are referring to right now, will have their own police systems. They will have their own counter-terrorism structures. And of course, the regional, the good part of the regional structure is where if a country is facing a particular terrorist action, the other countries will contribute to see that they go and support the country that is in the union. I think President Jonathan referred to it yesterday, where was it in Rwanda or in Botswana, where if there's any problem, South African police or military are sent to help. And I think that's what it should be. Just like we had ECOWAS. ECOWAS was basically Nigerian. Other countries were there, but ECOWAS was Nigerian. And we should be able to, share this responsibility if every country develops their counter-terrorism measures.
Mr. Makri, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, so I wanted to take you up with that. Our counterterrorism capabilities as a country, where do you think we are? Are we up to par?
We are not yet. We are not yet because counterterrorism, in fact, is going to be part of the state police. But we can decide to structure a federal counterterrorism group or unit that is well trained, a highly trained structure that will respond to critical incidents. And that's what we need, because it's basically training. It's basically training. And then weaponry. We have to give them the right weapons. Sometimes it looks funny. I was having a friend and we were discussing when the Kuriga girls were kidnapped, and you find out that they were moving tankers, tankers to that area. Those are not the right weapons for that. We need to have special weapons and deploy special tactics to address certain crimes. And I think that's what should be. So we train them, we equip them properly, and they can respond properly across the region.
That was something the president talked about yesterday. He talked about ransom collecting and illegal mining. And it's a situation that many people may not know much about, but in many cases fuels the problems that we're seeing in most parts of the country, especially in northern Nigeria. With the ransom collecting, it's brought up the question about poverty and, many people not being able to understand how governance doesn't get to them and resorting to all these criminal activities. As is, we just had a conversation right now where we talked about how people are even taking 100,000 naira as ransom. With ransom collecting and illegal mining, as the president said, he says they need to be nipped in the bud, but how do we get that done if the root causes of insecurity, such as poverty, is still so endemic in our country? What is your take on this scenario?
Now, thank you for that particular question. You see, one of the root causes of insecurity is poverty, unemployment. All those ones are there. Lack of security, food security, all those ones. Because we are not going to keep on, like the president said earlier, no payment of ransom. Now, when you pay ransom, and they use the money to go and refortify themselves by buying new arms and ammunitions. We don't want to do that because it is detrimental. We are hitting or hurting ourselves by doing that. So the best thing to do is don't pay ransom. But if you don't pay ransom, do you just continue negotiating? Because they will not give you the people, the hostages they took. Then you must be able to respond. That's why we're talking of a highly trained, response to critical incidents. We want a state police or, the counterterrorism unit, which will have a kidnap response team. And this team should be able to deploy within 15 minutes. And when we say deploying, we are not talking of them waiting till daybreak, because their special weapons will include night vision devices, imaging that they could use at night. They should be able to have helicopters that can fly at night, armed helicopters, attack helicopters. And these are things that we have to, because that is where I was very worried when it comes to what was discussed yesterday. Are we ready to fund it? Some people say, oh, we cannot, because, of course, the IG of police said it, we are not ready. We are ready, very, very ready, because there was a time in this country where they said we are not ready for cell phones. And of course, later we saw when the cell phones came all over the place. Even small children have their own phones. Okay, so we are ready. We are ready for state police.
For that, I mean, you know, part of the argument is that the governors will take advantage of this and run their opponents out of town. They give us several instances. You've been an operative in the field yourself, and you might have had first-hand experience with some of these cases when it comes to elections. What would your recommendations be, or do you think those points they raise are valid or not?
The fears are valid. The fears are valid. Because even we've had a governor come to television here and say that they actually rig election indirectly. And how do they do it? Policemen are deployed. And that's another part. You know, when we structure the police, then we have to, yesterday, who mentioned it? I think it was former President Jonathan. We have to restructure the INEC too, because we cannot continue mixing these people, and then of course they don't have the moral strength to resist. Policemen are deployed to a state. There's going to be an election. The governor goes there because he's going to run for election. Where are you people staying? Have you eaten? Okay, we have a place for you to stay. Okay, this is some kind of allowance for you to eat and all the rest. At the end of the day, if he tells them to rig the election, they'll rig it for him. And that's what they've been doing. So what do? We have to structure it properly in such a way that these people are not, you know, mixing up with the electoral process. And then, of course, state governors cannot, because we have to have different kinds of review, oversight, when a state police is created. You have a judicial oversight, you have legislative oversight, you have external oversight, external, like an independent body. And that's what takes place in other countries that operate that kind of system, an external body. And there should be community engagement whereby you find out that if there is any problem, the people in the community should be able to report that this is what the police have done. And if they go against the human rights, because that's number one, the human rights of people that they are protecting. They are supposed to protect and serve, not,
Mr. Well, when you speak about human rights, I say, wait a minute, aren't you a former DSS operatives? Does DSS know about human rights when it comes to getting their, whoever it is that they have to have in custody? So what's going on here?
I didn't hear you very well there.
I'm talking about, when you speak about human rights, many say, wait a minute, is Mr. Magre not a former DSS operative? Do they recognize human rights within the DSS when it has to do with your job?
Yes, well, you know, that's the structures that are going on too. All the security agencies need to be restructured. And the restructuring mainly is training, reorientation. I remember, I tell you this, I was in the service during the military rule. Okay? During the Buhari Diagbon regime, that was where we were recruited, and we grew up there to wherever we were. And then, of course, I was retiring when we have a civilian government coming, a democracy. And one of the major things that the headquarters did was to start reorienting people towards democratic systems. You know, so you find out that the impunity that was used during the military regimes does not happen in democratic systems, because now you are dealing with the human rights of people. There are constitution. Remember, in a military regime, the constitution is suspended and there is no judiciary. You know, the Supreme Military Council, you know, is the people that decide on all kinds of things, chaired by the head of state. So that's why many people are saying that, well, the best military government is worse than the worst civilian government or democracy. So, this is the situation we find ourselves. So, if that is the structure, and security agencies have to reorient themselves if they are not doing it. And then, of course, when we're talking of reorientation now about human rights and stuff like that, Nigeria should withdraw the military from internal security. Withdraw them. Train the police. When we are talking about state police now, training is the first thing. Train the police. Because what is it? Is the military going to bring their armored tanks, to start artillery, to start hitting terrorists? No. They will be trained in the normal or particular weapons to use.
Okay, just some other questions. I mean, much as we'll come back to this. So when, still talking on security-related matter though, these weapons that we hear and see different agents of state seize, for instance, customs. I know that last government, there were quite a number. Do they hand them over to the DSS? What usually happens to them?
Well, you see, in Nigeria, we say, give them weapons, give them weapons. And then remember, NSCDC, when they were formed, they were saying, oh, we need weapons, we need weapons. So they gave them weapons. They gave them these long rifles that are very cumbersome to carry. And then, of course, the customs, you give them weapons to start pursuing. And that's why yesterday, a lot of things really dropped, where they're talking of the boundary guards. And that is something that we need. These are the people that will have the special weapons to deal with. When you are giving them weapons, the weapons are different. All weapons are not AK-47. In Nigeria, all weapons are AK-47. Even private people that want to use or trying to look for guns to use, or they are asking for people to carry guns, they are all targeting AK-47. No, because the weapons are different. And when you are talking of this special counterterrorism structure, you have to give them the right weapons. Now, assault rifles, submachine guns, sniper rifles, these are all things that they could use when there is a situation that will arise. Ballistic shields, explosive shields, which could be used in case there is somebody. I'll tell you one thing. When I was in charge of the Murtala Mohammed Airport, when I was in service, we had an incident. A plane was hijacked from Murtala Mohammed Airport and taken to Niger Republic. And they were there for some days. I'm sure you remember that situation, And during that period, the Niger government in Niamey stormed the aircraft with their special team. These are special forces supported by France. And then, of course, took over the plane, released the hostages, and then, of course, they came back home. Now, if this happens in Nigeria today, as we are, I don't think we have a response team that could, deal with a hijack situation. So this is what we're saying. And you don't go and use military, to start shooting at a plane. There are special weapons to be used. In fact, as an aside, the other day I was hearing about the EFCC trying to arrest a governor, and they were saying, calling the military, it was very funny. Because we have invited the military too much to take over things that the ordinary police is supposed to do.
I mean, it's very interesting that he brought that up, special weapons that are necessary for special operations.
Exactly.
Okay.
Taser guns, whatever.
Before we wrap up with you, because we do have to take some emails before we wrap up the show, we want to be able to talk with you a little bit about the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, because that was something else that Mr. President talked about yesterday at the event. There have been so many agencies that are responsible for the mopping up over the years. Have they been successful in doing this? Because we still see a lot of these things going around and being used for all kinds of nefarious activities.
No, they've not been able to mop it up. They've not been able to.
What suggestion would you give if you were in a position where you could say, look, this is the way to get rid of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in the country? What suggestions would you give?
I think that, the suggestion I'll give is a simple one. Be deliberate about it. Be deliberate. One problem we have in Nigeria is that we are too haphazard. When we are dealing with security issues, we have to be deliberate. It has to be systematic. Now, small arms, we have a committee that was set up in the National Security Advisor's Office. Yeah. They are supposed to be in charge of the mopping up of small arms and light weapons across, because we have a lot of them in Nigeria, whether you like it or not. 80% of the illegal arms in West Africa are in Nigeria. And these things come in when we are having the militancy, and of course we've had the amnesty program where they surrender their arms. But I can tell you right now, all the arms they surrendered were just old arms they are not using again. More are coming in. Wow. These people are armed. Since it happened in Okwama.
We'll have to thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Mr. Dennis Amakre, former operative of the State Security Service. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we do have some messages. Go ahead, let's start with that.
I think we have one on the state police from Paul Agbolade. He says, the debate about state police is going back and forth because we're looking at a new creation or formation instead of deployment of available resources. If we check the technicality of the law that approved the NSCDC, that's the civil defense, this corps can seamlessly be unbounded into state police because their area of concentration is the local communities. There's no reason to create another unit. Instead, let the state government take responsibility for NSCDC formations or commands in their individual states, recruit, train, and remunerate them to their standard. At least this will be productive and accountable avenue to direct the monthly billions of naira the state governments are currently collecting as security vote.
Okay, we hear you. But we also appreciate you, Sam, Ero, and Ojuromi Fred. We thank both of you as well for sending in your comments. Well, that is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next time. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
Have a great day ahead. I'm Kayla Magwa.